Welcome to r/ask credit. What's your gotta take one for the team story? Took a class in college that I didn't want to take, but if I didn't, the class couldn't be run and two other people would not be able to graduate. I was on a cruise, and they were doing auditions for the end of trip show where you're impersonating a well-known performer/song. We were over an hour into the karaoke time and no one had auditioned yet. I'd had a few drinks and figured, what's the worst that could happen? That's how I found myself performing on stage as Ricky Martin with backup dancers. I was out with a bunch of my friends and the designated driver fucked off and left us about 10 minutes into the party. I did not have my license, but I knew the people I was with and I knew they would drive drunk, so I didn't drink and I drove them home. Got pulled over by the RCMP. He asked for license and registration. I gave him the registration but said I didn't have a license. I had let my beginner's lapse and didn't get it because I didn't have regular access to a car. He started in on me asking me why I was driving without a license, and I said, pointed to each person in the car and said, drunk, 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 and I didn't drink. He gave me back the registration and said carry on. I was an early employee at a game studio and we had fallen on hard times. Myself and the other founders all went to 25% salary for a few months to keep from letting people go. It was very hard as I didn't have much slack in my budget. We made it through. Some of the best times of my life. Kind of a gotta take one for the team, but it's a pretty shitty one. I was a freshman in high school and it was homecoming. Our class pulled a shitty prank on this girl who had a learning disability and voted for her to be the freshman rep. As a joke, and she won. Well, the guy that got voted to walk with her backed out the day before and I was second in line. Being a freshman, knowing it was a joke and knowing I'd have to walk her down with everyone watching, I was mortified, but I did it. I remember my stepbrother giving me shit and laughing at me, and then my stepfather found out what I was going to do. He chewed my stepbrother out and was immensely proud of me. I don't think she ever figured out it was a joke, and she was so happy that night. It was probably the highlight of her high school years, honestly. Some 25 years later my dad ran into her parents and they still thanked me to him. You just never know whose life you might touch. Be kind. A bunch of friends and myself were going on an 8-mile hike during a group camping trip. Before we left, one of our friends kept voicing his skepticism about being able to complete an 8-mile hike. His girlfriend kept urging him to go because she didn't want to hang back with him, she wanted to hike. So, he ends up going. About an hour and a half into the hike, we are going up a series of switchbacks and the dude just can't do it anymore. He tells us that he is going back. We all kind of look to his girlfriend to see if she is going to accompany him back, and she just turns around to keep moving forward. A couple of us were in the back kind of looking back towards him and then up towards the others who are continuing on, and then one of my other friends says, "Should someone go with him?" And we all kind of look at each other hesitantly. I finally jump in and say I will go back with him so that everyone else can keep going. I catch up to him and he says I didn't have to do that, but I tell him that I don't want him being alone all day. We make it back to camp and he immediately goes to take a nap, and I end up sitting at camp by myself for the next few hours until the rest of the people get back. I guess I should have listened to him when he said I didn't have to come back with him. The first year of the pandemic, I stayed on as one of the junior doctors on the COVID ward because I'm lucky enough not to have any medical conditions, and I live alone. Some of my colleagues would have had to make drastic life changes. I remember walking into the tea room and a nurse was crying because her son had severe asthma, so her family were temporarily living with the neighbors. She hadn't hugged her kids in a month. Earlier this year, me and my bandmates were at SeaWorld and in the line for Mako, and while we were getting in, we tried to put our stuff away in the containers that were to the left of the ride after waiting about half an hour in the line. We then discovered that only loose articles were allowed in the basket and that we would all have to get off the ride and go downstairs to get a locker, then do the line again. I realized it'd be a waste of time since it was a school trip and time was limited, so I grabbed everyone's items, stepped off of the ride and took one for the team so they could all go on the ride. My grandmother was getting older and struggling to get to the bathroom every time. Well, one time she didn't make it and someone had to help her take a bath. I jumped at the opportunity. Got her all cleaned and pretty and smelling great, brushed her hair just before bed too. Why? Because she raised me from 2 to 5. The learning years, the potty training, the reading/writing, teaching me to tie my shoes, add and subtract, letters and numbers, all her. She was patient and kind and understanding and loving and immensely wise. So me giving her a bath, shit, I'd do it again tomorrow. I miss her. My best friend convinced me have a couple of drinks together. Next thing you know, I'm carrying him on my back at 1 a.m. to his house. We were 16 at the time. Police came and arrested us. It was when quarantine first started in Greece. Nothing really happened with the cops. They just phoned our parents and waited. Both our parents came to the police station. They asked whose idea was it. I knew that if I told it was my friend's idea he would be fucked. So I just told them that it was mine. I got grounded for 2 weeks and he got for 1. I actually told my father a while ago that it was his idea and I took the blame for him. He laughed and said my son is a loyal friend. I'm a lead tech at work. I always take one for the team. You fucked something up? Let's fix it. Anyone asks? Blame me. I have the kind of personality that I never get in trouble. Management really likes me. I get away with stuff all the time. So, yeah, let me take the hit and you learn from your mistake. I was in Vegas with some friends, and we were at a rooftop club getting bottle service. One of my friends, Ed, hooks up with a girl, let's call her Nancy. Ed and Nancy really hit it off, and they go back to his room together at the end of the night. The next night, we're hanging out again and having dinner, and Ed has invited Nancy to join us. She does. So does her angry lesbian friend/roommate Carol. There's a long backstory that I never really learned. Something about how Carol was divorcing her husband, hated men, was living with Nancy for the time being, and probably had an unrequited crush on Nancy, but I never got the details. Nancy was obviously looking to continue the previous night's activities with Ed, as was Ed. Carol, however, was bound and determined to prevent that from happening, so she'd invited herself along and wouldn't leave Nancy's side. In order to give Ed an opening, I started talking with Carol. We got into an involved discussion about the ongoing Winter Olympics and the suicidal nature of Lucian's skeleton. It was actually a fun conversation. But while we were talking, Ed and Nancy slipped away. When Carol noticed that they were gone, her demeanor immediately changed, she clammed up, and she left soon after. Ed thanked me profusely the next morning. Was in a car ride with my GF and some family. My GF lets out a nasty fart, and my uncle starts complaining about the smell. It was the first time my GF met these people, and I figured it would be super awkward if they figured it was H, so I took responsibility for the fart. Besides some more complaints directed at me, nothing else happened. The fart was hella stinky, so I don't blame them for complaining at all. Thank you for watching, guys. We hope you enjoyed our video. If you did, leave a like, it would mean a lot to us. Hope to see you all in the next video. Bye.